What's going on, Summoners? I'm Kangas and welcome back to the ProGuides channel. In this video, I'm giving you our mid-patch update following up on all of patch 11.10's buffs and nerfs. And of course, this means it will also provide an updated tier list for each of our roles. So make sure you're subbed to the channel and let's hop right into it. Starting off with the top lane, Darius' nerf this patch is one that a ton of players, me included, were definitely looking forward to. And overall, it had the effect that we expected. His win rate dropped a bit, and without a doubt, the increased E cooldown has done some damage to the top lane terror. His ban rates are still very high, and there's also no question about whether or not he's still a good pick. He is, but as a result, we're okay leaving him in the S tier for now. We don't have the data for the entire patch yet, but as of now, his win rate has dropped about 1% overall, while his win rate in high elo suffers even smaller losses. Surprisingly, Kennen has actually gotten a lot from the buff to his W. Increased poke damage has increased his presence in lane, and he wins easy matchups even harder than before, and has a much better shot at winning ones that were close in previous patches. Early on, most notably before the first recall, the extra 10 damage on his empowered auto attack really adds up over a few trades. So due to these buffs, we've actually gone ahead and bumped Kennen up to the A tier. Finally, we have Kayle, who was also buffed this patch. The increased range after level 16 has made the world of a difference for Kayle players. This patch, she's seen a lot more play and overall win rate has gone up considerably, roughly a whole %. Even in high elo, she's seen a lot more play than before, and as a result, we moved her to the A tier. AP top laners getting buffed also means that the meta of the game is slowly shifting as well. While some patches ago the top lane saw practically none of them, their increased popularity is bound to force more of an AD-centric mid lane meta. For other top lane changes, we've made various shifts to the list. The most notable of these is that we bumped Gwen up to the S tier and moved both Camille and Gnar down to the A tier. The Riftmaker buffs have been great for Gwen. She can now max out the stacks almost instantly, and as a result has seen an increase in her damage output this patch. On top of this, Ignite has become a very popular choice with her. A lot of high elo players are even running Ignite and Teleport on her. With some extra damage and healing reduction, a lot of matchups are made significantly easier now. And also Gwen's W provides a solid safety net which can let you get away with dropping Flash, but it's certainly dependent on the matchup as well as personal preference. And that also brings us to today's question of the day. This is a question that comes up often in the community, but since Flash is such a popular summoner spell taken on pretty much every champ, do you think it needs a nerf? Why or why not? I personally think the spell is obviously overpowered. I mean, everybody takes it, but in spite of this, I don't like the idea of reworking it or removing it, because pretty much the whole game is balanced around it being in there. So if you take it out or nerf it heavily, that changes a lot. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now, although Camille and Gnar are still good picks, their greatest strength comes from their safety net. At the moment, there are picks that feel much more impactful when ahead. If you were to play multiple games on the same champion, other top tier picks can more consistently dominate lane and carry games by snowballing. So our OP picks for the top lane are still going to be Sett and Shen, followed up by Lee Sin, Maokai, Poppy, Riven, Mordekaiser, Fiora, Urgot, Wukong, Jax, Sylas, Malphite, Garen, Darius, and Gwen in the S tier. And a quick note, if you're in gold or lower, actually bump up Mordekaiser to the OP tier, because he's doing really well as a result of the buffs to Riftmaker, but really only in lower elo. Next up, we got the jungle. The jungle meta is bound to see some changes as players adapt to the systematic shifts. However, the overall effects of the changes are that the role is less snowbally and also less punishing for champions that don't have as fast of a clear. So first up, we have an update for Rumble's placement. He's seen a massive spike in his popularity following his run at MSI. While a lot of players claim that he's absolutely broken, his win rate actually suggests otherwise. Over the past few patches, he's struggled to break the 48% win rate mark in both high elo as well as overall ranked. The reason we're moving him to the A tier is that there are undeniable merits to the pick. Before we talk about them though, one thing I want to say is that a champion can be strong, but not good for climbing. If anything, he's on that border between S and A tier. Overall, he's a strong pick in high elo, so we want to clarify that high elo players can consider him an S tier pick. Things like player error in lower elos can definitely contribute to this. For example, messing up heat management during a jungle clear can really lose you crucial seconds. Rumble is a pick with tons of damage, fast clear speed, and incredible teamfight presence. And the cool thing is he also opens up your mid laner to pick an AD champion. However, if your team doesn't take advantage of these strengths or lack of crowd control, there's a lot of lost potential. Also, Rumble jungle, like in solo lanes, has a very hard time coming back if he falls behind. Many other junglers have some form of comeback mechanic built in, like if you're able to pull off a perfect insect kick as Lee Sin, or even get that dream 5-man Fiddlesticks ultimate, there's plenty of teamfight impact regardless of whether or not you deal damage. But Rumble's impact depends on his damage as well as a small slow, so if he's behind and the team comp isn't perfect, enemies can easily just walk out of his ultimate and reset the fight. fight. So overall, Rumble is a cool pick. You can play him if you want to, but definitely learn how to path with him. If you're having trouble with this, you can always check out ProGuides.com and talk with one of our challenger coaches. They'll walk you through all the intricacies of how to play Rumble jungle. He's not as easy and simple to pick up as things like the Morgana and Diana were, so if you want to add him to your jungle repertoire, definitely check him out. One more pick we want to talk about is Kindred. They're in a similar case as Rumble right now. They're a pick that's finding a lot of success in high elo, more so than low elo. Of course, this comes down to a difference in both mechanical skill and also, crucially, game sense. Having better spacing, positioning, and movement in the middle of a fight is obviously going to make the world of a difference for any player. In addition, Kindred's ultimate is not an easy one to use. I'm sure we've all witnessed it used poorly at some points, and high elo players just make these sort of mistakes less often as they're usually more experienced on the pick. If you're high elo, consider them an S tier pick, otherwise we're okay with their current placement in the A tier. And the final change that we made is that Graves has been bumped down to the B tier. The changes have not been kind for him. Like we said, fast clear speeds aren't as rewarding as before. And in the current meta, there's also a bunch of picks that can just straight up outduel Graves as well, meaning that he's not able to bully out enemies as frequently. He's just fallen off as there's junglers that either have more lethal ganks or deal more damage than him. So our OP picks are Elise, Morgana, and Lee Sin, followed up by Kha'Zix, Evelynn, Nunu, Ivern, Fiddlesticks, Diana, Shaco, Zac, and Xin Zhao. And now moving on, let's talk about the mid lane next. Following up on the mid lane changes, we'll start off with Galio. The nerfs weren't too big, but we've decided to follow up by moving him down to the A tier. His win rates have dropped much more than we initially expected, but he's still a great overall pick. He deals a decent amount of damage and provides plenty of utility through crowd control as well as his long range ultimate. Increasing his W's cooldown has unfortunately impacted his team fighting ability a bit, as being able to cast it one more time over a long fight can really win or lose it for the team. Next up is Talon. Although we did see a small nerf to his Q, he's still pretty OP. He continues to terrorize high elo especially. His damage is difficult to outplay, and although you can react to his W, a lot of his damage output is simply unavoidable. His damage alongside the ability to quickly skid across the map make him a solo Q king. He remains in the S tier, but high elo players should note him as an OP pick instead. And next up, we got Katarina. She lost 5 movement speed, but her overall win rate has dropped only a tiny amount. It is important to note though, her nerfs are much more pronounced in elite levels of play. It's now easier to punish Katarina and also a little easier to escape with that last bit of health. Those close scenarios happen much more often in high elo. Players have a deeper understanding of their matchups, and fights should theoretically come close every time. So we'll leave Katarina in the S tier for our update. One more pick that we've added to the S tier is actually Lee Sin. Although not as popular as top lane Lee Sin, he still sees enough play for us to add him. The trade-off is that there's less lane to run down an enemy. Lee Sin's high mobility makes him great at taking advantage of the long runway up top. In the mid lane though, he exchanges this for squishier opponents, which he can usually one-shot. Landing a Q can often be less rewarding though, since it's much easier for your opponent to flash into their turret afterwards. Not that it's always safe though, Lee Sin still deals enough damage to one-shot enemies that he's poked down. Also, a quick change is that Lux is now up to the A tier this patch. The buff to her E has definitely helped her out as both a mid laner and as a support. And while our S tier does feature Qiyana, we want to take a quick second to denote that there's a huge gap between her results in elite levels of play and for the rest of the player base. She's been consistently finding herself at a 52% and higher win rate in Diamond 2+, but overall, she actually finds herself hovering around 47.5%. The best bet that we have for this is that it requires good macro play and patience to play Qiyana effectively. You need to choose good places on the map to take fights, and you also have to play heavily around your Q's stealth mechanic, something that higher elo players will be better at. So low elo players might want to instead consider Yasuo as an alternative OP pick. While he's not the easiest champion, he's definitely a lot more straightforward and much easier to pilot when snowballing. A lot of Yasuo's strengths come from his IDPS as well as his lifesteal. He spent a lot more time basic attacking, and once you pull ahead, the game definitely gets easier. So our OP picks for the mid lane are Zed and Yasuo, followed up by Pantheon, Talon, Annie, Fizz, Echo, Qiyana, Viego, Diana, Ahri, Yone, LeBlanc, Kassadin, Sylas, Anivia, Vladimir, Katarina, and Lee Sin in the S tier. Next up is the bottom lane, and the only major change that we saw was a nerf to Jinx. Overall, her nerfs were pretty small, but they did have a noticeable effect on win rate. We mentioned that even losing a little armor is pretty significant for this champ, and as a result of her high base health, the loss of any armor is a bigger drop in effective health than many other marksmen. That said, Jinx is still in the OP tier as she's still a great pick that snowballs hard and scales well into the late game. A similar pick to Jinx, however, is Tristana. With Jinx a little bit weaker than before, this has created space for Tristana to shine as well. While the gameplay is different, they do fill a similar niche, late game hyperscalers that still have immense pressure in lane, especially when they have a lead. One thing that Tristana does have over Jinx though is that she's more mobile with her W. Her range after leveling up also ends up really high, which contributes heavily to her ability to carry late game teamfights. In both high and low elo, Tristana's ban rates have seen increases over the past few patches, so we moved her up to the OP tier too. So our OP picks for the update are Jinx, Samira, and Tristana, followed up by Kai'Sa, Ezreal, Ashe, Vayne, Jhin, Seraphine, Swain, and Sivir in the S tier. Finally, let's wrap things up with support. Starting off, we're talking about Thresh. He saw a minor decrease to his base health this patch, and just like all of us expected, he's still OP. But surprisingly, he has seen a pretty big drop in his win rates across all ranks. Nevertheless, he's still good enough with his versatile kit to lock in nearly every time. Bard also received that small nerf this patch, as his passive damage was decreased slightly, and like we expected, he's a champion that remains in the S tier even after the nerf. Next up is Lux, who received an excellent buff to her E, increasing the base damage of it at later ranks. Her overall support win rate has gone up nearly a whole %, but we'll still leave her in the B tier for now. The aggressive meta at the moment still makes it really difficult to pick her, especially when there's other enchanters who usually just feel more rewarding. Zyra also got some nice buffs this patch, as she received an increase on her passive Vine Lasher slow, as well as a decreased W cooldown. Most importantly, this buff has increased her win rate and higher elos. She's actually doing decently even in elite levels of play right now. But the result in low elo is still good news because she went from good to very good. You can consider her an S tier pick around mid and low elo, and in high elo, we can comfortably say that she's at least A tier. But we do want to give players a little more time to adapt before we make any final conclusions. She's seen a massive spike in popularity in high elo, and therefore players might need some time to readjust. Finally, we have Yuumi. Her Q's damage was increased a bit this patch, and the result was obviously going to be an increase to her win rate. Ironically, Yuumi's win rate has actually gone down in high elo, but this is because more people are playing her. There's no doubt that Yuumi's insane utility makes her a rewarding pick, but there's so many popular champions that can make laning a living nightmare for her right now, so we'll leave her placement untouched. For our OP support picks, we'll still feature Leona, Thresh, Lulu, and Senna. Our S tier includes Bard, Morgana, Nautilus, Blitzcrank, Maokai, and Zyra. And that'll wrap up our mid-patch update. Really hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. And also make sure to check out the link in the description down below to join our community Discord. Until next time, everybody, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.